It's time for Chess Chest!
What?
No.
Chess chest.
Okay, welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video, and welcome to episode 2 of Chess Chest. Sorry this one took a little bit of time. I was intending to get right on to doing more Chess Chest episodes, especially since the first one had a pretty positive response. A lot of people were pretty jazzed for it, so I was like, great, I can't wait. Then I got PlayStation VR, and that kind of put everything on the back burner for a while. So apologies, I didn't really follow up too quickly with this, but I'm going to do more of these. This is going to be an ongoing series, so don't worry there. Side note, there is actually a chess game for PlayStation VR, and it looks pretty cool. I mean, why would you play this in virtual reality when you can play it in real reality? But there's a mode in this virtual chess game where you can actually play in some otherworldly underworld kind of a place, and you're up against death. And that's really, really cool. And I have to admit, I'm very, very tempted. I mean, don't we all want to kind of embrace our inner kind of seventh seal and play chess against death? I know I do. So I have a feeling I might be getting that one, so I'm going to combine Chess Chest with PlayStation VR. But that's way down the road. I want to get a little bit further along in talking about this awesome game just on its basic principles. And the first thing I want to do in talking about chess proper is something that not a lot of people discuss very much, and that is the board itself, the checkerboard. It has a great history in and of itself. I mean, all these little pieces have all got a lot to talk about. But the board that this whole game takes place on, the battlefield, if you will, where two tribes go to war. Frankie goes to Hollywood? Anyway, this checkerboard actually goes way back, much like the game of chess itself, and in fact, it predates chess. Now, I'm going to go into further detail in the future, but just to really address the checkerboard, I need to sort of tell, so chess originated in the Middle East in a game called shatranj, which also had a checkerboard. In fact, that's where the checkerboard started. Before that, shatranj was played on just a white grid, a little bit like this wall, actually. And shatranj is actually the descendant of a game out of India called chaturanga, also on a white grid. Chaturanga is actually a game that came from China, shangqi. That was also on a white grid. And if you go even further back, shangqi was a modified, or it's a game that kind of grew at a time in China when they were playing Go a lot. And I talked about Go in the first episode of Chess Chess. Go uses a standard flat field with lines all over the place, or, in a grid, and you move your little pieces on the points, on the actual intersections of the lines. You move from spot to spot and you play the game of Go. What happened is they actually, over the years, when shangqi came along, that also stayed on the points of the grid, and the pieces move around and they do their thing with a lot more, I don't want to say complexity, because Go is a very complicated game, but in a more granular mathematical way. Shangqi, a bit more like chess, has pieces that have got certain roles, certain movements they can do, but they do it on the lines and they turn at the intersections. When the game moved to chaturanga, the pieces sort of moved off the intersections and into the squares themselves, but it was still a white grid. One side note that I thought was kind of interesting, there's a really good film from 2002, 2004 called Hero with Jet Li. Now, I'm not a big Jet Li fan, but I really like that movie. There's a scene in there early on when Jet Li takes on one of his opponents, and in the scene, they're in this temple area that has a lot of Go boards with white and black pieces being moved around as kind of setting up where's this battle about to take place. In the subtitles, they refer to it as the chess area, the chess temple. I can't remember. But I remember when I was watching it in the theater thinking, hey, that's Go, but they call it chess. Now that's translation, and maybe it's shogi, which I guess is a little closer to what Shang-Chi became. We're getting beyond the point here, but it's significant to note the checkerboard actually started off as the white Go board with just the lines and nothing else. When the game moved into Shang-Chi and then came, I guess, through the spice trade to India, they brought with them these white grid boards. And the developers, the people who invented Chaturanga, which is what our chess is based on, must have had these white grid boards to play on. And when the game eventually made its way to the Middle East and modified slightly into Shatranj, I think in the 16th century, or is it the 12th century? It escapes me right now. It was decided by somebody, it's very hard when you've got nothing but white lines in front of you to know exactly which direction your pieces are going to move at. And somebody thought, well, let's make it black and white squares. I'll show you a little example here. Now, this is just a rudimentary idea of what Shatranj might have looked like initially. I'm using coins. They may have had little figurines or probably just basic discs with symbols on the top to indicate which piece they were. And as I move these pieces around the white grid, you kind of get the impression of what the rudimentary version of Shatranj must have been. And if I now switch it over so that the same pieces are in the same spots, but now on a black and white checkerboard, you can really see the dramatic difference of how much easier it is to tell. For example, the early proto version of the bishop, if he's moving in a diagonal, it's a lot easier to see it if it's on a black and white checkerboard if your opponent is in your way and you'll be able to hit him or strike him with your moves. So the development of the checkerboard actually goes way back, and the black and white part of it comes from the Middle East. It then moved with the entire game as it went through its various iterations and the modern chess that we all understand today. Couple of interesting points about the chessboard. Now, I see this sometimes in movies, or if somebody's hurriedly, rapidly throwing a chessboard together in a scene like on a TV show or something. There is a fundamental rule of chess. The white square so you've got an 8x8 grid of black and white, so some corners are going to be black, some corners are going to be white. The rule is, in order to know which way your board is set up properly, the queen sits on her color. The king sits on his opposite color. And it's sometimes not always easy to tell that quickly. So what is a very easy rule of thumb, and something that I shake my head when I don't see it happen in these TV shows and early setups, quick setups, is the rule is white goes on the right. So if you've got your white corner of your checkerboard, make sure as you're sitting on one side of the playfield, the white corner sits on the right-hand side of you. If you've got a black corner on the right-hand side of you, you got to rotate the board 90 degrees. It's something that really drives me crazy. Now, my board is a little bit unusual. I got this chess set, and I'll go into its details in a future episode. I got this chess set in New York City, and it was just the set. There was no board that came with it. I had a board, but it was way too small. I mean, these are big pieces, these guys. So this board is actually part of a silly thing I saw in a novelty store where it was actually shot glasses, and I guess whoever loses, you take a shot. But it was a big glass sheet that would fit these pieces. And originally I had it lit from underneath, so it was all kind of cool, futuristic and space age looking. It doesn't quite have that now, but as per the opening credits, you can see there's a very faint difference between the white and the black or clear pieces on my board. The checkerboard then went on to be used in other things like checkers and drafts, if that's a different game. So the checkerboard has remained around for a long time. Why is it 8x8? Again, that goes back to its origins in Go. They had a whole bunch of different grids of a whole bunch of different sizes. I don't know what the largest is, but I've seen some Go boards with dozens upon dozens of rows in each direction. I believe when these boards were taken, when Shang-Chi came about, that's when we had a little more standardization of just how many grids, how many lines there were going to be on this board. Because to go into Shang-Chi very, very briefly, it was developed out of a real war that happened. A general, who I could look up his name, probably put it down below, he, I think, was trying to show the battle that just occurred. There was a Go board nearby, I guess with an 8x8 grid. He grabbed various figurines and pieces and he moved them around to show, look, we moved over here and then we attacked this base and then we had to pull our forces back. I believe that's actually where Shang-Chi came from. It then became a little moved army on a board. Again, on the grid, not in the square. So that's why the checkerboard is 8x8. That's why it's black and white. And remember, white on the right. So next we're going to start talking about the pieces, and they also have a lot of history. Just as a little spoiler, the pawn. We're going to talk about him, and he also goes way back to ancient China. Until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.